Before today's video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest videos. If you want to see a case or topic covered by Paranormally Listed, then go to criminallylisted.com and fill out the questionnaire under the Suggest a Case tab. Number 3. The Murder of Hart Northey. George Northey and his brother, Hart, were close as siblings could be. Growing up near Cornwall, England, the two spent nearly every waking moment together, often venturing out to the beach 10 miles away in the morning and spending the entire day there. But when the brothers got older, the call of the sea became enough for George. They left home, much to Hart's dismay, to become a sailor. Hart took over the family's business and stayed in their modest village called St. Aglos. It was the mid-19th century, so communication with each other was tough. There were letters, sure, but not as many as either would have liked, or as often. So Hart was alone that Saturday morning when he climbed on his horse to head into the town market. He spent the afternoon shopping and checking off his list for the shop's supplies. But Hart didn't notice two men watching him and following him. After he loaded his saddlebags with what he needed, Hart climbed back on his horse and began the slow trot back to his home. It was February 8th, 1840, and it was cold. As the sun fell lower in the sky, Hart soon noticed a pair of long shadows growing longer as they approached the road. Hart steadied his horse as two men climbed out of the snowy culvert and onto the dirt road. But Hart was relieved. He knew these men. They were brothers, and they had done work for his business in the past. The men were cordial enough. There was some small talk, till one of the men came down to the business at hand. They knew Hart had just come from the market, and they knew he had a pocket full of cash. And they kindly asked him to hand it over. Confused, Hart thought that the men were joking, until one of them pulled out a revolver. Now angry, Hart refused, so the man with the gun pulled the trigger. Hart slid off his horse and onto the road, where he began to bleed to death. With a fine point on the murder, one of the brothers choked the air out of Hart while he lay bleeding, staring at the sky as it turned into night. The brothers quickly went to work, emptying Hart's pockets and dragging his body through the brush, dumping him on the bank of a creek. They covered his body with branches and then kicked at the snow on the road to overturn the massive bloodstain. But what to do with the gun? One of the brothers pointed to a dilapidated cottage along the road with a hatched roof. The gunman stashed his pistol in the hatching of the roof, and the two brothers walked back down the road, counting their reward. Hart's brutal murder probably would have gone undiscovered if it wasn't for his brother, who was in a port half a world away on the island of St. Helens. At the same time Hart was being killed, George had a vision of it all. He saw the murder in his mind, choking back tears as he watched the brothers choke his brother and dump him in the woods. Frantic, George got the next ship back to England, agonizing during the long journey and praying that what he had seen was not real. As soon as the ship moored, George rushed to the local constable, explaining what had happened to his brother. How did George know all this if he was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? The cop asked. He just knew, George said. Sure enough, Hart's body was found exactly where George led the police. And when George described the two culprits, the cops had a good idea who he was talking about. The Highwood brothers, drifters, conmen, thieves. A search of their shack produced blood-stained clothes and a suspicious wad of cash. Had they owned a gun? They did, one brother admitted, but he lost it a while ago. The brothers were arrested and put on trial for Hart Northey's murder. The prosecutor suspected they were guilty, but only had circumstantial evidence. Still, he offered to spare the two from the gallows if they were to confess, which they did. However, the magistrate sentenced them to hang just the same. As George Northey and the prosecutor sat to watch the brothers' execution, the lawyer revealed he still had nagging doubts about their guilt. A stickler for tying up loose ends, the lawyer said he still wondered about the murder weapon. It was never found. "Have you checked the hatch roofing of the cottage along the road?" George asked. Later, the prosecutor was shocked when he reached into the hay of the roof and pulled out a pistol. He turned to George, baffled. "How did you know?" he wondered. "I saw the foul deed," George said, in a vision. Number 2. The murder of Myrna Joy Aken. Myrna Joy's mother, Isabel Aken, had her dancing shoes on. It was the evening of Tuesday, October 2nd, 1956, and Isabel and her daughter were set to have their weekly dance lesson together. But it was getting late, and Myrna wasn't home from work yet. It was so unlike her, not only to be late, but not to call. As the hours ticked by, worry turned to terror, prompting Isabel and her husband, Fred, to call the police. The cops in the resort town of Durban, South Africa, were diligent, if skeptical. They talked to Aken's neighbors in the suburban area of Pinetown, and a suspicious picture emerged. Joy was not the happy-go-lucky 18-year-old her parents made her out to be. In fact, she had asked around about the idea of her moving out of her parents' house now that she was legally an adult. The cops then headed to the auto parts store where Joy worked in the office. Her co-workers confirmed her state of mind on the day she went missing, and added that she had a secret boyfriend, one she didn't tell her parents about. The man, they said, had even been around earlier that Tuesday, and they had seen Joy get into the man's beige car when her work shift ended. The police soon told the newspaper that there was nothing suspicious about Joy's disappearance. She had simply carried out a long-planned plot to run away from home. But Joy's father didn't buy it. He told the media that Joy had laid her dancing dress on her bed before going off to work, and that she had called her mother at lunchtime to confirm their evening plans. Why would she do that if she was planning just to take off? Convinced that there was more to the story, Joy's brother, Colin, told his parents about a man he knew of named Nelson Palmer. Palmer was a white-haired school teacher who lived nearby. He was a man who, according to local rumors, was sensitive to spiritualistic feelings. Maybe the man could help find his sister. Desperate for any kind of hope, the Akens invited the 64-year-old Nelson to their home. He took a piece of Joy's clothing and immediately fell into kind of a trance. When Palmer opened his eyes, they were downcast. He was sorry to say that Joy was dead. As her parents wailed in grief, Nelson explained that he could help them find her body. Perhaps it would bring them some peace. Joy's remains, he said, were 50 or 60 miles south, over 2 hills, in a culvert near water. Nelson drew a map for Joy's father, who took it to the police. For their part, the cops patronized the grieving dad and went with him and Nelson to the spot on the map. The detective in charge was baffled when they did indeed discover the nude and already decomposing body of Myrna Joy Aken, stuffed in a drainage pipe near a riverbank. She had been shot multiple times in the head, but from her midsection down, she had been hacked to a bloody pulp. When the pathologist concluded that the mutilation had been to remove an unborn fetus from Joy's abdominal cavity, the search was on for that secret boyfriend her co-workers had told them about. The beige car he drove was next to be found. It had been borrowed from a local radio repair business by an employee named Clarence Van Buren, who lived across the street from the Aken's family with his wife and 2 children. Van Buren knew the Akens well. He had been to their house numerous times to fix their radio. Van Buren was tried, found guilty, and executed for the murder of Myrna Joy Aken. South African law prevented the prosecutors from entering into evidence the method by which they found Joy's body. But word was getting around. When a man named Dr. William G. Phillips went missing in early 1957, his family called Nelson Palmer to help find him. Palmer attended to the man's worried wife, who gave him a necktie belonging to her husband. He then went into a trance and said that he believed that the good doctor would be found nearby, close to a body of water. With a newspaper reporter placed behind him, Palmer then ventured out the family's back door and walked 500 yards past the backyard fence to a stream, where they found the man's body, a victim of suicide by gunshot. The once skeptical reporter was astounded and asked Palmer how he pulled off this fantastic feat. "There's nothing fantastic about it," Palmer explained. "I believe it is possible to pick up thought waves in the same way as radio picks up wireless waves." The media coverage of Nelson Palmer's abilities spread all over Africa, and he was soon overwhelmed with requests from worried family members, desperate for a miracle to find their missing loved ones. But the requests overfilling his mailbox became too much for Palmer. The visions of dead bodies and the overwhelming emotional impact of his trance-like states compelled him to retire from his newfound job as psychic detective. But he wouldn't be the last of his kind. Number 1. The murder of Sally Lucas. Sally Lucas had amnesia. That was the working theory put forth by police when the 36-year-old wife and mother of 2 went missing on August 16, 1971 in St. Louis, Missouri. Sally had last been seen in the parking lot of the Town and Country Shopping Center. But witnesses recalled that the petite, attractive woman appeared to be out of it as she walked to her car, as if she was in a daze. Sally's parents told the police they had spoken to her the day before, and she seemed normal and happy. Sally's husband, Larry, told reporters that he spent the next week driving around in search of his wife to no avail. He even drove to Sally's childhood home in Wooster, Ohio, 500 miles away, in hopes she'd driven there. "We did a lot of driving," Larry told UPI, "but we came up blank." The article caught the attention of Jim Mueller, who was taking a night school course in extrasensory perception at University City in St. Louis. He brought it to his teacher, 36-year-old housewife, mother of 6, Beverly Yoggers, who thought she might be able to help. Yoggers, called Bevy by her friends, contacted the newspaper, where a reporter put her in touch with one of the detectives working on the case. The police were skeptical, but they were also at a dead end with no leads and no motive for Sally Lucas's disappearance. With the permission of Larry Lucas, Bevy went to the family's home and examined some of Sally's personal belongings. Instantly, Bevy said she saw a vision in her mind of Sally's missing car near a large body of water. In her vision, she also saw 2 men in uniform bending over the open trunk of the vehicle. The next day, the police in Florida rolled up on a green 1969 Pontiac soft top parked illegally alongside Highway 98 in Panama City, just a few dozen yards from the beach. Inside, they found a sleeping man named Tony D'Amico, whom they arrested for acting suspiciously. Despite his pleas, he had done nothing wrong. Officers then popped the Pontiac's trunk, only to find Sally Lucas's purse and identification. Did Miko stop talking then? With news of the car's discovery and that Bevy Yager's vision had been accurate, the police perked up an ear. After Sally's car was towed back to St. Louis, Missouri Highway Patrol Sergeant John Kuriakos quietly allowed Bevy to sit behind the wheel, hoping she may get another vision of what happened to Sally Lucas. And Bevy, unfortunately, saw it all. She got a look of agony over her face, said news reporter Bill Fustel. She began to sweat. After about 10 minutes, Bevy stepped out of the car and looked down at the notepad she had been scribbling on as she sat in the Pontiac. The pages were filled with the letter C. There was a stick figure drawing of a horse, a rudimentary sketch of a small bridge near a ditch. Flashes of roadside mailboxes and impressions of small airplanes rounded out the vision. Then, suddenly, as the reporter and the sergeant watched on, Beverly jerked violently back. She later said she felt a painful blow on the right side of her head. While the FBI and the state police combed Florida in search for Sally Lucas, that was where her car was found after all. Bevy was convinced that the woman was near her St. Louis home. For his part, Sergeant Kuriakos was interested in the horse aspect of Bevy's vision. Sally Lucas had been reported missing after she failed to pick up her daughter from horseback lessons at a riding stable in nearby Babbler State Park. Such a rural area may also account for Bevy's visions of rows of country mailboxes. And the park was only 2 miles from the spirit of St. Louis Commuter Airport. As Bevy led the police through the park, they were shocked when they came to the intersection of Highway C and Wild Horse Creek Road. Soon, they began to pass rows of mailboxes, and they approached a bridge that spanned the now dry Wild Horse Creek near a popular picnic area. On September 6, 1971, 19 days after she vanished, Sally Lucas was found in that dry creek bed. Dental records had to be used to identify her badly decomposed body. The coroner said she had been killed by a blow to the head. The Sergeant Kuriakos told In Search Of in 1977, "My God, everything she told us on that day in the car before we found Mrs. Lucas came true." The discovery of the body of Sally Lucas aided the eventual conviction and life sentence of Tony D'Amico. 4 years after the murder of Sally Lucas, reporter Bill Fustel called Bevy Yagers about another missing persons case. St. Louis travel agent Sandra Franchak had gone missing that summer while on a trip to Mexico. The paper was about to run a story based on information from a Mexican newspaper that Sandra's body had been found. We wanted to see what Bevy thought before printing the story. Unfortunately, Bevy said that this simply wasn't true. She had a feeling Sandra would never be found. The St. Louis Globe-Democrat held off on printing the story, but other newspapers around the country didn't. 6 hours after the wire service reported Sandra's body had been found, it released a retraction and correction. The information had been wrong. Sandra's body was, sadly, never found. However, 2 corrupt police officers claimed they had killed her in a robbery gone wrong. Bevy Yagers continued to help police investigations until her death in 2001. In the 1980s, Bevy formed Psi Squad, a team of sensitive seers who looked into the future and saw justice. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please make sure you subscribe. we'll have a new video about the paranormal every week. If you just discovered this channel, please make sure you check out our other channel, Criminally Listed. We have over 325 videos featuring bizarre but true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. We also have a podcast about cold cases that were eventually solved called Criminally Listed Presents Into the Killing. You can find it on Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.